All right, so it's Sunday early afternoon, and we are back at Luck Fu restaurant here at the Maryland Live Casino, and trying to eat a little bit lighter this time than we did the last time we were here on that dinner break. So we just got some beef pho and some Vietnamese iced coffees here, just getting ready for the day before we were about to sit down for a nice 1-3 cash game session. So let's get into some hands. So we sat with the max here, which was $400. And the first notable hand that comes up here, we have pocket fours. And we decided to limp an early position here, which I don't think is bad in these lower stakes live cash games. If it was a tournament, I am folding this hand a good amount of the time. Otherwise, I would look to raise it on my deeper stack depths and occasionally limp it on some shorter stack depths. We end up getting 3 other limpers, including late position and then the blinds just completed. The flop comes 4-3-7 with the 3 of hearts. I bet $10 into the other players. I just think that this is a flop where a bunch of people are just going to be calling, and there's just so many times people just don't fold. So I don't think I use too much energy in these spots. I flopped a set. I'm going to start betting. Bet $10. We get 2 callers. The turn is an 8 of hearts, and I decide to bet 35 at this point into the 2 other callers, and sadly everyone folds, so they did not have much. Pick up a small pot there. Then the next hand that we have Jack 8 in the small blind. This pot is limped 4 ways, and the big blind checks. I completed, obviously, in the small blind. The flop comes 5-6-7 with 2 clubs. The flop was bet $10 by one of the late position limpers. I, with an open-ended straight draw, of course, called on the flop. And then on the turn was a jack. There was 2 clubs on the flop, jack on the turn. So now we have top pair with an open-ended straight draw. I check in the small blind again. I don't think I want to lead here and bloat the pot really big, get raised, and just be in a spot. Especially now, I'm very comfortable bluff catching at this point. The turn is bet $21, and we are heads up at this point. I call the turn. And then on the river, when the club does not come in from the flop, the river is a 9. So it is a blank 9. Flush does not come in. And I now have a straight. And I think that it's so obvious if I lead here that I hit the straight, though it's probably the play versus just your standard 1-3 live player. Be obvious, value bet, they don't know how to fold. And for some reason, I thought maybe that this player was going to be capable of betting. And I check, and the river checks. And we end up picking up this small but notable pot here, I would say. Feels like with live, all these pots really count. But it wasn't a massive pot. But I definitely think I should have just bet this river and forced them to make a calling mistake versus hoping that they would make a betting mistake here. And then the next pot that we have here, I have Ace-7 of hearts. I call an open of $10 on the button. We go 3 to a flop. So middle position opened. I call the button. Big blind calls. We're 3 to a flop. The flop is King 3-6 with 2 hearts. So we have the nut flush draw. The initial raiser ends up betting $20. I call, and the big blind calls. So I think sometimes we could raise here, but I also don't want to raise and then have to get in a pile of chips on this flop with just my draw. And I also think when I call and get there, again, people are going to have issues folding, so I can just value town super hard from that point. So we go 3 to the turn, and the turn is an 8 of hearts. So we make the nuts here. The initial raiser bets 50. And then now I have a decision. Do I want to raise here or do I just want to call? Now, I think if we were heads up, I would have for sure raised here, but knowing that the big blind was still in this pot, I chose to just call and pray that the river did not come a heart, and that the big blind for just 50 bucks would come along as well, and then my hand would still be fairly disguised. And on the blank rivers, when a lot of people will go into a check call mode, I can just really go to value town. Unfortunately, the river comes a 2 of hearts, so now there's 4 hearts on the board. At this point, we still do have the nuts. The last opponent checks, and I'm in position. I made it 115 bucks, and they ended up folding, but we did pick up a nice pot here, and we're starting to build a decent chip stack here. I'm sitting in the big blind with king 8 of hearts, and it goes 4 ways to the flop. I limped pot, so there was no raise here. I just check in the big blind, and the flop comes ace king 8 of clubs, 2 clubs on the flop. And I decide to check my big blind here, thinking that the one of the 2 people behind would end up betting, but they did not. It checks around, and the turn is an ace of clubs. So the flush comes in here. Now we have 3 pair, which isn't worth anything, and the king. But for some reason, I chose to bet 10 bucks here. Looking at it, I don't think I hate it. Single club hands are going to call, and queen jack, jack 10 are going to call as well for the price. It's not really that much. These players will call with worse hands here in the situation. I get 1 caller, so we're heads up to the river. The river is a blank 2. I check river, and the last remaining opponent bets 26 into a $32 pot. I think for a minute, and thinking that they would have to bet their missed clubs from the flop, and I lose to 2-3 of clubs, actually. So they had a smaller flush here. They turned it, and then just disguised it on the turn with a call. I check, and then of course they're going to value bet, or at least you would think they're going to value bet a lot of the time. And I lose, and honestly, we should probably just fold here. Feels like we got a little bit stubborn, but paid them off nonetheless. And now we have pocket 9s in the small blind here. And we call a button open to 13, which was an open over a limp in late position. And I think that 9s are strong enough. I could re-raise here, but considering that I think a lot of the 1-3 live players are not isolating limpers light to exploit them, I think since they are raising here, they could have a hand. I'm out of position, so I decided to just call, though I think that there's definitely a case for re-raising the 9s here in a good amount of situations. I don't know if 1-3 is a spot where I'd want to re-raise necessarily, but we end up calling in the small blind. We go 3 to the flop. The late position limper did call as well. Big blind folded. The flop is 9-4-6 rainbow, and I check in the small blind. Late position checks. The initial raiser bets $20, and I have a top set here, super strong hand. I decide to just call flop, considering there's no flush draws on the flop, and the late position limper calls as well. The turn is a blank 3. We check again to the initial raiser, who now bets $40. Here at this point, I know I have to start putting chips into the pot and get value from my hand. And since the button bet again into 2 other people, I definitely think that they have a hand here, just like we thought pre-flop with them isolating the limper. So I decided to make it 120. I wanted to make it decent, but I also didn't want to make it too big. Both of these players had a decent amount of chips, with the limper actually having over $1,000 in this pot. They had a pretty nice stack. I make it 120, late position calls, and the button calls as well. The river is another 3, so we have top boat here, and we're feeling really, really good. And I choose to bet 225 bucks. And honestly, in the moment I was thinking about what could get called. I wasn't necessarily looking at stacks. I did look a little bit to the player to my right, and this was going to be about half of their remaining chips. Given the size of the pot here, the bet seems fine if I'm gonna be getting like pocket 7s, 8s, some over pairs to call. Though I think that we could have maybe gone bigger here. Late position goes all in. Button side folds after thinking for a minute, and I call off, my last 140 to win versus pocket 6s. So boat over boat here in this situation. And after all the chips are counted up, I ended up winning a $1,265 pot. I actually posted a picture of it on my Instagram. I was pretty excited. The biggest 1-3 pot that I've ever won. So that was really nice to coolish somebody in a big situation. And the button player told us after the hand that they had pocket queens. So that was massive, and that put me in a really, really nice chip position on this table. And that was the last notable pot that we ended up playing here before we were going to play the nightly tournament there, which was kind of our routine, play some cash games until the tournament started up for that day. And yeah, we had a really nice positive cash game session here. We ended up playing for about 4 hours or so and had a $600 profit. So a really good cash session here. Thanks for making it to the end of my video. No one does that, do they? All right, look, I respond to comments, so please leave a comment below the description and let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, check out some of my last videos here. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button here. All right, my name is Drew. Peace out. Catch up with you later.